Hey y'all, Cooking with Henry here, Country Cooking with Henry. Gonna make some meatballs and gravy today. It's kind of a Swedish meatball. So I got a pound of hamburger all ready to go. I'm gonna add 2 eggs to that. About a teaspoon of salt. Teaspoon of onion powder. About a half a teaspoon of pepper. And I'm using a multi-seasoning as well. I'm using about a half a teaspoon of that. You can use whatever seasoning if you want to use all-purpose seasoning. This is just a multi-purpose seasoning that you get at Trader Joe's. Then I'm going to add about a cup to a cup and a half of breadcrumbs. And about a 1/4 cup of milk. Rings off, hands washed because we're diving in. We want to mix that real good. I got my oven preheated to 375. All right. I'm gonna spray my baking pan with some Pam. Just keep the meatballs from sticking. And I'm going to use my little scooper to give me the perfect size meatball. Because you don't want them too big. You want them about like that. So I'm going to finish rolling these meatballs out, and I'm going to get them in that oven. It's going to take about 45 minutes to bake to get them good all the way done, and then I'll be right back with you. All right, so while I've got my meatballs in the oven, I'm going to cook some green beans, get those done because it's going to take a little bit. They're frozen. So in my pan, in my pot, I've got 2 slices of bacon I'm going to cook crisp. Pull that out, put my green beans in there with some beef broth, and let that cook. Put the bacon back in there, crumble it up. That way there's pieces in there. Everybody gets a bite of bacon with the beans. And we're going to let that cook. And then we'll be making a roux for some gravy to toss this together with some noodles and put it back in the oven. It's going to be real good. So stay tuned. Be right back. All right, so I've used a 12-ounce package of frozen green beans. You hear my happy helpers in the other room there. I got that in there with that bacon grease, a cup of beef broth, and a cup of water. So it dilutes the beef broth a little bit. You can use chicken broth. You don't have to use beef broth. I'm just using a beef-based meal tonight, so I'm going to keep everything beef-based. So I'm going to let them simmer down. Let those come to a boil and then let them simmer down. And then while we're doing that, we're going to start our roux for our gravy. Be right back. All right, so in my big pan here, I've got, now you don't have to use quite such a big pan that I'm using. I just use this pan. This is my go-to pan. I love it. I got 2 tablespoons of butter melting. I got a tablespoon of olive oil. Now the reason I use olive oil is because I like my gravy to be real smooth. And it'll be really smooth with the olive oil in it. It's just a lot smoother than if you don't use any oil. I don't want to use vegetable oil. That's a little too heavy. Olive oil is heavy, but it's light in the same way. It makes a nice smooth gravy. So our beans are starting to boil. I'll put that bacon, crumbled that bacon, put that back in there. That's going to be good, y'all. Let's get that down on a simmer. Down on low anyways. And we're going to let this butter melt. And this gravy I'm making is what we're going to put in our pan with our meatballs and our egg noodles. And I'm just going to use probably 3/4 of a package of extra wide egg noodles. I'm just going to use probably 3/4 of the package. I'm not going to use the whole package. Let's check our meatballs here while I'm right here. Oh yeah, those are looking good. Smelling good. Now we're melting this butter and heating the olive oil to make our roux. And what a roux is what gives you the thickness in your gravy, if you don't know that. If you do know that, then you're good to go. Then you're ahead of the game. But a roux can be called for many things. It can be called for stews, for soups. It's a thickening agent made with flour. Now I'm using self-rising flour. You can use all-purpose flour. It does not have to be self-rising. But I use self-rising flour. And I'm going to use about 3 tablespoons. Almost 1/3 of a cup, but not quite. I'm going to dispense that there. About 3 tablespoons of self-rising flour is what I use in it. And then we're going to start to stir that around. I'm going to get that hit up in all that oil and butter. And we're going to let this start to brown. We don't want to do it right now because it's real light. I want my gravy to be dark. So we're just going to let this cook around in the pan. And that'll make a good roux. Get all that flour in there. It's on the sides. I use a whisk because it gets rid of the lumps. The lumps will cook out as long as it's not too bad lumps. But I just constantly work that flour, work that roux. Alright, so we got our green beans going. I got those down on simmer. They're still boiling away, and that's fine. We got our roux going. Meatballs in the oven. Give me just a minute, and I'll be right back with you. Our roux's still going. It's not quite dark enough. It's starting to get a little tan color to it, and that's fine. I want it darker than that. Once this is done, I'm going to hit this up with about 4 dashes of Worcestershire sauce and 2 cups of beef broth. And that's going to make our gravy. I'm going to continuously stir this and keep watching for it to get a little bit more brown. And what's going to happen is once that beef broth hits this, it's going to start to thicken up and it's going to become that gravy that we want. Now, I didn't add any seasoning to that yet, but I will. And all I'm going to add to it is just a little salt and pepper. We can go ahead and do that now. I'm going to do, and you can do this to taste. It's just probably a half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, half a teaspoon of that seasoning that I got, and this is just a savory seasoning. And that's going to be it for seasonings for that. That smells good already. Alright, that's starting to darken up nicely for me. That's what I want. But you see, I just constantly keep working it. Just keep working it with my whisk. And this is a rubber coated whisk because I don't want any of my Teflon coming off of my pan. This is my good pan. I use this for everything. I've got other pots and pans, of course, but this is just my go-to pan, and I love it to death. All right, so now let's go ahead and hit that up with that beef broth. And we're going to do about 2 cups. We'll probably add more to it. I'm sure we're going to add more to it because this is thickening up already on me. And we want to get that stirred good. Oh yeah, that's definitely going to need some more. Let's hit that up with that Worcestershire sauce too. If I can find it. There it is. I knew it had to be somewhere in here. About 4 dashes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, there went my... Let me rinse that off. Alright, let's go ahead and add about another cup of beef broth in there. Because we want a nice thick gravy. And we're just constantly going to work that. So let me just keep working this and I'll be right back with you. Alright, I got my gravy about done here. It's looking really good. Let me just get a spoon. This is my gravy spoon actually. And just, it coats the back of that spoon. Makes it nice. It's a nice consistency. That's what you want. And I ended up having to put another cup of beef broth in there. I made my roux a little thick. I should have went about 2 tablespoons of flour instead of 3. But I'm making a big pot, so this will be fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this down on simmer. I got my beans on simmering. I got my meatballs in the oven. And they're going to take about 45 minutes. So I'm just going to keep stirring this once in a while to keep it smooth. Put everything in my little pot there. Move that up there. Hello. So I'm going to let this finish cooking. And we're going to let those meatballs finish cooking. Once they get done, I'm going to show you how to put all this together. We're going to put it in a Dutch oven. Put it back in the oven for about another 30 minutes to cook those noodles. I'm not cooking the noodles separate. I'm going to put the noodles in the gravy and let the gravy cook the noodles. So it'll be real good. Anyways, I'll be right back with you. Alright, so my meatballs are done. So what I've done was I poured those egg noodles into my Dutch oven. Now, if you don't have a Dutch oven, don't worry about it. Just use a baking pan, a deep baking pan with the aluminum foil over the top. It'll be just fine. So I poured that over the top of them. Now I'm going to take those meatballs. I'm going to place those in there. This smells good already, and it still has about 30 minutes to bake. Our green beans are done in the back on the stove. So that's what we're going to have for dinner tonight. We're going to have this meatballs with the gravy and the noodles and some green beans on the side. All right, we got that done. Now let's take that gravy we made and pour that right over the top. Get every bit of that. Get that a little stir there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put just about a half a cup of broth down at the bottom. Just pour right over top of that in those loose spaces. That way the gravy don't get too thick and everything gets cooked. Now we're going to put that back in that 375 degree temperature oven for about 30 more minutes. All right, once that gets done, dinner's on. I'll be right back with you and show you what it looks like. All right, y'all, it's all done. Don't that look good? So there's our version of Swedish meatballs and green beans seasoned with bacon. So y'all try that recipe. It's easy to follow. I know you're gonna love it. Keep watching me. Country Cooking with Henry.